Do you also sometimes feel overwhelmed by all the tasks ahead with your ESG reporting? Even if there are a massive amount of tasks to do ahead of us, we can find ways to organize ourselves better and to save time in the end. Let's face it, ESG departments are constantly understaffed. I've worked for 20 years now in sustainability, as well in big corporations as in small startups, and I always had the experience that there was not enough time to do all the tasks that needed to be done. So I found my method to plan ahead and to set the right priorities. Today I'm going to show you why it is so important to organize myself, the exact 4-step method that I use to organize everything and to save hours of time, and a lot of tips and tricks for more efficiency. But first I'm going to explain why a good planning is so important for big projects. It is a bit like with my garden. Every spring I could be busy 24/7 to set up everything, to plan everything and to get the garden going. However, I don't have that time, of course, and so I need to set the right priorities. And we sit down as a family and decide which of the harvests are most important for us, which fruits and vegetables, and then I plan backward from that. So I know when to sow which vegetable to have a good harvest in the end. And I can postpone things that will grow even later in the year and set the right priorities. And this way I make sure that when the time is ripe, we will have fresh, tasty and juicy tomatoes for us to enjoy. And it's the same with ESG reporting. Everything is dependent from each other. And we also have to plan when to involve other people from the company, because we can't do it alone. And of course we don't waste other people's time, and we also don't want to waste our own time. And we don't want to waste a lot of money for consultants to, in the end, save us because we haven't planned well. I like to plan all my ESG tasks using the Eisenhower Matrix. And as we are today just focusing on the ESG reporting, I will just use all the tasks ahead that I need to do in the next few weeks or months for the CSRD reporting. I first write down all the tasks that I need to do in the next month to get a good overview. I know that sometimes there might be additional tasks which show up during the course of the project, but I know I can always add those later. Then I take all those tasks and sort them into the Eisenhower Matrix. For the importance, well, I concentrated here on the most important topics, so there will be not too much variation according to importance, but I will have variations in the timing, so that is for now the most important thing. I need to know which task I need to do when. So first, of course, I need to understand the company and I need to map all the activities of the company. Then next step will be to get everyone on board, very important. And this is something I can do on my own, to have the sector check for the materiality analysis. Then next thing, I need to do the long list and the stakeholder analysis for the materiality analysis again, and map the value chain, and finally do a heat map of the value chain. I also need to secure resources, of course, and start with the first impact, risks and opportunities drafts, which I then can recheck with some colleagues. Of course, it's important to establish a team for the reporting process, and after I've done the IROs, or risks and opportunities, I need to check with the chartered accountants whether this method aligns with what they want to see for the limited assurance at the end. That's a very important step. Then I can start into the workshops involving a lot of other people, and also same with the stakeholder engagement. Now coming to a very specific topic, the gap analysis, which is usually done after the materiality analysis. However, I got the tip from some consultants that it is also possible to do a gap analysis right before starting the materiality analysis, just because there is some topics which will basically always be important, and that is E1, S1, G1 plus the ESRS 2, so we can already get some data to that. And then there's some additional tasks. Of course, I need to align on the IT, and I also need to do things like the climate risk assessment and the EU taxonomy. And I always need to document the process. Now, next step that I do is to find out which of the tasks I can do on my own, and I will mark those. So these all get some friendly Anne sticker next to it. Then I mirror all of this to get the right timing, and I start to draw it as like for a Gantt chart, where I can see how long will each of the tasks take and how can I arrange those. And it helps for me, of course, that before I did the Eisenhower Matrix and I know which of the tasks are most urgent. Having finished that, this is my first draft, I then have a look at it, and when I see that there is some timing within that time frame where there's a lot of work to do, maybe a bit too much, I can then rearrange everything and just move things around. In the next step, then I mark in a color all the tasks that I can do on my own, so to have a better overview. After I finish this, I have some sort of a very basic Gantt chart, which I then translate into my Excel Gantt chart, adding the weekly planning and really adding some timings to it. Now that I know when to work on which of the tasks, I can start directly with the work, and as I'm alone at the moment, I will start with something that is right at the beginning and which I can do alone, which is the sector mapping, and I will show you how this works in my next video.